Over to you, sir. Dr. Azhar, Principal, Government Postgraduate College Mandian, Abbottabad. Sir, please start.
Assalamu alaikum, dear audience. I am Dr. Azhar Mehmood, Principal, Government Postgraduate College Mandian, Abbottabad. I extend warm welcome to all student, research scholar, our honorable guest, Dr. Naweed, Syed, and today's webinar. Dear audience, Government Postgraduate College Mandian is one of the prestigious institutes of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, which has shown number of achievements. The mission of our college is to provide opportunity to less privileged class to acquire education in the field of modern sciences. We are offering 13 undergraduate programs in the field of modern sciences. We know that in our country there is a gap between scientific knowledge and its practical application. We try to bridge this gap. Despite of limited resources, we encourage and facilitate our students to participate in different research activities. Our students have published number of research articles in national and international journals. Organization of today's webinar is our effort to enlighten our students with technology and techniques of artificial intelligence. Dear audience, it is immense pleasure in introducing our honorable guest speaker, Dr. Naweed Syed, a renowned scientist of the world. Dr. Naweed Syed is the professor and scientific director at Alberta Children's Hospital, Research Institute, University of Calgary, Canada. Dr. Syed and his team are the first to develop bionic hybrid which enable direct dialogue between brain cell and silicon chip. He has published more than 140 research papers in prestigious peer-reviewed scientific journals. He is the receiver and holders of multiple research grants. He is the member of number of scientific advisory boards. Dr. Syed trained over 57 PhD and MSc students, 20 postdoctoral scholars, and has given several hundred invited lectures around the world. His presence is blessing for us. It will be the source of encouragement and inspiration for our students and for all of us. We are really thankful to him for taking the time out of his busy schedule to accept our invitation. I request sir to enlighten our student and scholar with his precious words. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, sir.
I'm really indebted and grateful to Professor Azhar Mehmood for his kind invitation, and also the department head, Sajid Khan Sahab. Particularly, I'm indebted to Imran Sharif. I could not turn him down because he has the names of two politicians that I'm most scared of. On the one hand is Imran, the other is Sharif. And I think these two people have had the best battle in your country in terms of politics. So I'm really grateful, and I think it's a tremendous honor and a privilege, and I congratulate you for such fantastic accomplishments for your college. And I think what I would really like to do today is to give you a perspective as to not where science or research they currently are, but where they will be by the time you are graduating and you are also getting into the market, in the job market. So, let me begin by sharing my screen. Can you see my screen? Is to walk you through first in terms of what really artificial intelligence is. But let me tell you where I have come from. So I'm talking to you from Calgary, which is really located in the foothills of Canadian mountains. And we are about, I would say, if you were to drive on this road for about maybe 12 hours, on the other side of these mountains, you will arrive in Vancouver, which is the westmost part of Canada. So about 12 hours. And if you were to drive, in this direction, eastwards for about 3.5 to 4 days, you will arrive in Edmonton, and I think, in Toronto, which is the largest city in Canada. So you can imagine from here onwards that how large this really country is. We are located in the foothills of Canadian Rockies, which is really very pretty. This is our Canada Olympic Park. This is where the Olympics were held in 1988, and this is what really brought me to Calgary. And these are our buildings. This is where the complex is, and this is where we do our research. I think I have to admit somebody. Maybe Imran, if you could take over the task of admitting people, that will be really...
Okay, okay, sir. I am doing it. Please continue.
Okay, so, and you think you have cold weathers? Well, take a look at our weathers. This is really very pretty normally, but then there are days we are almost stuck in our parking lot. We had a big snow dump just 2 weeks ago, and we still have lots of snow. So it can be very cold, but summer is really very pretty and it's a very beautiful. It's a huge country with very little population. So what I'm going to do today is to really talk to you as a neuroscientist who has kind of dabbled into artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotics, and to give you the idea as to how this really is important, and that you are in a field that will really be the hottest field in the years to come. And I'll give you the reasons as to why I think that is the case. And also, I think when you think about, what is artificial intelligence and what is machine learning, and these are the two concepts I'd like to define first before I dive into showing you some of the things that you still will believe that they are really not believable. And the things that we are doing in terms of planting chips in the brain and what these chips can actually do. So the question really is that how do we define learning and memory? That's an important question. And how does it really tie with intelligence? And how this intelligence in turn is linked to, for example, artificial intelligence or machine learning? Then we will ask the question, can machine learn? Is it possible for machine to actually have a learning capability? Because this is what the machine learning will really mean in the longer run, or the artificial intelligence will mean. Are humans learning machine? I think this is a philosophical question that we will debate, and I will walk you through to tell you that actually human brain is very much like a machine. So then the question will be, can machine acquire context? So this is something that we would like to do today. So define what the actual learning is, what its memory is, what is artificial intelligence. Can machine learn? Can humans actually, are machines, humans machine? And how can we really bring them together so that we have super intelligent or super AI, which will be really the future in the years to come? So, what is intelligence? Intelligence is really the ability to acquire, and apply knowledge and skills. And this is how we will define intelligence as. So, for example, your ability to recognize a problem, and then your ability to solve that problem from what you know already, and what it is that you can learn from that particular experience. So psychologists, they will define intelligence as the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills that you have acquired and that you have learned. So it's a very simple thing. Identify a particular problem, solve that problem from the basis of the experience that you have had in the past, and what it is that you learn out of this when you move forward in the future time. So what is learning and memory? Now, learning and memory, they are actually very closely related concepts. And learning, and what we defined as in neuroscience field, is the acquisition of skills or knowledge. So where you actually acquire certain skills and gain knowledge, that we defined as learning. Memory, on the other hand, is the expression of what we have acquired. So memory will be the action part where you actually allow this to happen. You know, the interesting thing is that when you, let me finish this sentence first. Another difference is the speed with which the two things actually happen. So people think, what is learning, what is memory, which happens first, and how do they really occur? The difference between them is the speed with which two things can happen. Now, if we acquire the new skill or knowledge slowly, and it takes the efforts and with lots of labor, that is learning. The acquisition occurs instantly, and that is making a memory. So, these are the really differences. Once again, is the learning and memory are very closely related concepts. Learning is the acquisition of skill or knowledge, whereas memory is the expression of what we have acquired. So this is really important to differentiate and learn these, very clearly, these definitions, because this is what will help you understand what artificial intelligence really means. And because this is a term that we have coined on the basis of our knowledge in the field of neuroscience. Now, the memory actually occurs very, very fast. So if you look at monkeys, and if we do tests where we test monkeys from memory, so on, for example, this particular screen, we will flash 30 numbers, and those numbers are randomly displayed in little square boxes on the screen. And if you had a human being, or you take a graduate student to sit there and ask them to recall those numbers, and they will be flashed only for 10 seconds or 15 seconds, and humans cannot do more than 7 numbers that they could recall. And this is why, our telephone numbers were limited to 7, because this is what the capacity of our brain is used to be, 7 numbers. That monkey, on the other hand, will be able to remember all 30 numbers. And because its short-term memory, which we call working memory, is actually far more greater than us, because we gave up that working memory at the expense of acquiring languages and through evolutionary time. So we were up on the trees as the monkeys, and then what happened? We wanted to really get down. We had to give up our working memory, and this memory was very important for monkey, because monkey had to really see the enemies all over in different branches of the trees, and when they're going to attack, and then anticipate and then execute it. They had to remember this very, very well. So I think memories, again, it's something, it occurs very, very quickly and very, very fast. It's something to remember. So when you think about artificial intelligence, or what we call AI, it is theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. So visual perception, speech, face recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. Whereas the artificial superintelligence is when one machine could have the capacity of the entire human race. And I will take you right to the end. What will happen to us if we have super intelligent or artificial superintelligence or AI devices when we reach the point of singularity where these machines can do just about everything that humans do? What will happen to us? And that's really an interesting question to do. So once again, artificial intelligence is the theory and the development of computer systems, and that are able to perform tasks which normally require human intelligence. So they have to really problem solve, thinking logically and using our visual perceptions, our speech and face recognition, decision making and translation capabilities. So this is something that you really have to remember what it means. So if we are to go from humans to humanoids, which is machine, one of the important things I like to really really remember in your field is that data that we collect from computers and other ways is not information. And information is not knowledge. Knowledge is not wisdom. Wisdom requires conscience, which is very, very unique to humans. And I think we will challenge that narrative as well. If a super intelligent AI gets access to our limbic system, our thinking parts of the brain, or our reptilian brain, a very primitive part of the brain, and it has the ability to connect it with the frontal cortex, the frontal part of your brain, you can actually design these machines to have feelings, just like humans do. And will they have conscious? I think that's an interesting question that is worth really thinking about. So machine learning, on the other hand, so I told you what intelligence is, what artificial, machine learning, artificial intelligence is, and now let's talk about machine learning. Now, machine learning is an application of AI that enables the system to automatically learn from experience without human intervention. So you actually don't need humans to teach these computers or these machines to learn. They have the ability, they have the innate propensity, built-in ability to be able to learn on their own. The example will be, AlphaGo Zero. So Alpha, Go Zero is a game which is really very complicated and very few people, humans can play, and they can also really have champions around the world. It's a difficult game to play. So they use AlphaGo Zero for this particular machine, this computer. Nobody taught this computer how to play this game, but the computer actually learned on its own, using its intelligence to be able to now beat each and every human being, and they actually won all the championships. So this is, nobody had actually taught this computer how to play AlphaGo Zero, but it played and it defeated all the humans. So I always say that, if we could empower a super intelligent AI with an equivalent of, as I said, the limbic system, and we couple it with cortex, that part of the brain, the machine would learn to love and hate, and it may even be able to make up things like we do. We make up excuses, we make up stories, we make up, often make up lies, and they will become an expert lie. Now the question is does this machine now have conscience? That is really an important question when you're studying in this particular field, that right from the get-go, what is really conscious and how do we know a machine is a conscious machine? And what happens if they are not? Or if they are conscious, what will happen to, are we summoning the devil? Are we allowing the devil to come into our lives and change it? And in Quran, Allah also says that, Ya ayyuhal insan, if you do not behave, you will be replaced. And sometimes I wonder whether that replacement will come in the form of these machines that we have designed and we developed. The one important thing to may be superior. We know even a simple fruit fly or a worm has, they don't have GPS system. The fly, a bee will go from place to place and it comes back, it collects the nectar and it creates the hive, doesn't have engineering degrees, but it has a masterful design the way it already does. So biological intelligence that may not have the cognitive functions that we humans do, it may be superior, but humans have become less biological and more technological. So what is happening to us humans is that using these machines, we are actually giving away our biological intelligence our ability to really continue to think. As a result, our brains are starting to degenerate and at the expense of these machines. And I'll give you an example. The highest IQ was really of taxi drivers in London, and they could take you anywhere in London without GPS, without checking the map. And now, since they started using GPS, they actually are struggling because your biological intelligence that you had is now being compromised by technological intelligence. And I think this will be the major drawback that will allow these machines to take over us. Now, the question is, when you compare both brain and computer, and if you're thinking about artificial intelligence, on one hand, billion neurons or brain cells in a human brain. They're actually more than the stars in the galaxy. And these cells are connected through trillions of synaptic connections through which brain cells will talk to each other. If you think from a computer perspective, the processing capability is about 200 hertz. It is about speed of sound you could imagine. It has limited storage capacity, and it also had limited really space capacity, because you cannot really put too much into there because its gigabyte doesn't actually allow this. When you think about a computer, on the other hand, computer has a 20 gigahertz. It's the speed of light, not sound, but speed of light. 300 million meters per second. That is the compute power of a supercomputer. And when you think about in 1 week, 20,000 years of human capacity could be recapitulated by these computers in just 1 week. So in 1 week, 20,000 years of human capacity, could be the work that humans could do in 20,000 years, and these puppies can do this in just like a week. Now, in 40 days, it can acquire and store data which will take normally humans over 100,000 years. So you could imagine that when you think about all of this, if you think about the hardware and the hardware capabilities, you know that the computer's hardware capability will anytime beat humans' brain's potential. But an important thing to then ask a question is that the brain is actually a mind machine, and it again containing billions of interconnected neurons. But the important thing to remember that it is not hardwired for life. Your brain changes all the time. And when you go, hopefully, if you stayed awake through this talk, you would have gotten several thousand new synaptic connections in your brain because of your learning capabilities. And your brain has the ability to learn. If you paid attention, there are no distractions, there are no interference from other sources in your memory. You will actually be able to understand. There are 100 billion neurons, and they are connected by trillions of synaptic connections. And these connections are the points whereby brain cells talk to each other. So our brain is also a natural cyborg, which allows us to attach ourselves to machines such as computers. Naturally, right now you're connected to your cell phone is connected to your server is connected to satellite. So what this actually does is that it makes us humans a natural cyborg, like $6 Million Man or Arnold Schwarzenegger, whereby you actually have the ability to connect to the machines. Can machine connect back to us? That's really an interesting question. The other important thing that you need to really remember is that brain is not hardwired like a computer. Your brain has the ability to change all the time. And we call it plasticity. And synaptic plasticity, what we call the provides us learning and memory experiences that are absolutely incredible. When we think about, let's say you were coming to Lahore and you realize that the Ravi Bridge was blocked, your brain, and this is where you have found the job, and you have to come through that bridge every time. And as you're coming through, the bridge is blocked, you will find an alternative pathway. It may take you a little longer time, but with a lot of repeat, you will unmask many of these secondary pathways that you can find alternative routes to get to Lahore. So this masking is generally thought to be one of the main ways the plastic brain reorganizes itself all the time. And that is really something very important to remember, is the brain is not hardwired. It has the plasticity, synaptic plasticity, which means it changes all the time. Now, if you think about brain, advantage of more or less an engineering principle that the computers are also functional on. So what happens is, when you had two contact between the brain cell, this is one neuron, the impulse will come, which means that there will be electric impulse. When it arrives at the terminal are calcium channels, and these channels actually are housed with ions. And when an impulse or a current impulse arrives at this terminal, these channels would open and they allow these ion channels to flux in the terminal, and this is where they bind to these neurotransmitter receptors or neurotransmitter molecules like acetylcholine, dopamine, and serotonin. And when they bind, they will bring them to the terminal and cause their release. And when these neurotransmitters are released, they bind to their specific receptors on the cells that they're talking to, and it will activate a response in those cells. So this, what really happens is that this is how brain cells will communicate from one end to other, and we can really figure it out how this all happens. So important thing to really remember is that when you have two brain cells, when you fire an action potential or electrical impulse in one cell, you can see that it generates a very consistent response. A little bit harder, and then you made a memory. Now this memory is stored because you fired an impulse, you studied extensively and paid attention to, you get a much bigger response. And next day you have your exam. When you come for exam, that single action potential now will produce a much bigger response in the neuron, in the postsynaptic cell than the previous responses. This augmented ability we call plasticity is the ability of brain circuits to really scale up their communication capabilities or scale them down. And after exam, when you come home and your mom and dad will ask, well, what was the question, what you answered? He said, oh, I don't quite remember. Actually, this is the working memory, which is often use dependent and not time dependent. So to give you a nutshell, that there are tens of billions of brain cells. Each and every brain cell really has these thousands of these synaptic connections. So our goal in the research is to find out how brain communicates, how brain functions and controls simple reflexes like, locomotion, respirations, and simple motor tasks. How does it really do this? The other important question that we ask is that if a brain cell dies, either due to stroke, trauma, injury, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, because natural replacement of damaged brain cell doesn't take place, how do you actually repair that loss? How do you regain that? So we thought that, maybe another important opportunity for us to do would be to maybe create, something that in terms of, artificial intelligence or by making brain-machine interfacing. So when you think about brain has a factor that changes over the circuits all the time. So we have now in our lab, we can study up to 100,000 brain cells real time. We can label them. We can actually study their communications, how they interact with one another. This is the hippocampus. This is where your learning and memory occurs. And we can label these brain cells and localize their connection, trying to understand how brain process information. Because any robot or a artificial intelligence device that you are trying to make to have artificial intelligence based on human intelligence you need to first know how humans actually learn and how they exhibit learning or memory related tasks. So when you think about human brain, it is actually a thinking machine. So let me give you a basic 101. The right side of your brain is actually mostly processing. It works kinesthetically through movement. It relies on your, the moment it is, what you see, what you feel, what you taste, how does it feel like, how does it sound like, and all of these, your senses, aapke jo hawas-e khamsa hain, they are actually registered in this part of the brain. So this is where this brain will realize what is happening in this room and at this time, and what you can see, what you can hear, what you can touch, what you can taste, what you can feel. So that part of the brain is really what we call the right side of the brain, and it relies for now moment, what is happening here. And that is a beautiful moment, because then you don't care about coronavirus, you don't care about what's happening outside in the politics or in weather, because you cannot see it. So you stay in that part of the brain, and this allows you to be able to really deal with things that are then and there. Your left part of the brain is a completely different world. It's a very different world in a sense that it will take that sensory information that is coming from the right side of your brain, and it will analyze it. It will even further analyze it. Then it will check, the past history from the past, and then it will take this current information, connect it with the past, and project it on the screen for future to think actually what happens. This is the part of the brain that tells you, don't forget to pick up bread, because otherwise you will not have, breakfast in the morning. This is the part of the brain that tells you, look, you have to do your laundry this weekend, otherwise you will be wearing dirty clothes. This is the part of the brain that really tells you that who you are. And when you say, I am, you actually get disconnected from the right side of the brain. So this is how really brain process, and we know a great deal about different parts of the brain, their processing capabilities, but we also know that the brain is actually a thinking machine. It takes the present and the past and connects it with future, and then it allows you to generate some kind of reactions. So our research program has allowed us to really tease these parts apart. So take them apart. We know that the brain cells, which are the neurons, they are connected with synapses, so the synaptic connections. I am the one who's doing the talk, you are listening. I am the pre-synapse, you are receiving this information. You are the post-synapse, and this computer is acting as a synapse, which is a two-way communication link between us. So when large networks of these brain cells get connected, they will be in the neural circuits, they form neural circuits, neuronal connections, and many a times these neuronal connections, we know they are not hardwired, and they change all the time. So our learning, memory, intelligence, plasticity is altered all the time based on our neuronal circuits. And this is what really gives rise to behavioral circuit. We know that many of these connections are genetically determined, but almost 80% of our brain really matures because of the experiences. And this is really, really important for you to know, because most of the time we learn from our lifetime experiences, and this is what shapes our brain. And because learning experiences are completely unique, so is your synaptic plasticity, learning and memory is very unique. And as a result, it is very difficult to develop a program which could really fit all humans or all kinds of machines. And most of it happens during early development. You can see that how quickly your brain develops as compared to other organs. It's the fastest growing organ, and anything that will perturb this development will actually cause your brain to go haywire, and it gets really all messed up. So you think about here, and you can see these two.
I've never seen any other birds. And there I see is our friend the goose.
So this wooden block actually, if you look at this side, it looks like a goose or a duck. And when you present this shed, flying, it is really flying around as if no problem
happened when he
happens.
first did this experiment in the London Zoo.
So this is a genetically built-in circuit. And then what happens is that the professor will change the shape.
If you were a duck, would you worry if you saw a goose?
And,
You mean he will worry when Professor Malzak changes that goose into a hawk? Well, let's
so
watch.
now the shape is changed to make that little, wooden plant look like a hawk, eagle. And you see how this duck is really afraid or scared. And even though it's not real.
That's a really frightened duck.
So it is really, really
Not all
frightening.
ducks react this
So
way.
what it really tells you is that many a time there are many circuits in our brain that are hardwired, and we're beginning to understand as to how these circuits help us learn, memorize, or create intelligence. Let me give you another experiment. So now this is a rat in our laboratory, whereby this rat has never smelled a cherry blossom. But when we offer the smell of cherry blossom, we shock him at the same time. When the electric shock is given to this rat, it panics, it has anxiety, it has fear, it has really traumatic reactions, heart rate goes up, the brain activity goes bananas. And then from now onwards, whenever we will expose this rat to cherry blossom smell, it will, even without a shock, it will behave as if it is being shocked. So, these kinds of responses can often stay with these animals for a lifetime, and they will never recover. In humans are very similarly as well, that humans can also have this intergenerational trauma that can stay for very, very long. And I'll show you an example of that. So what happens with this particular rat now is that if you take its babies, they have never smelled cherry blossom, they've never been shocked, but whenever they smell cherry blossom, they will actually exhibit fear and their anxiety and their panic. Their babies will do the same thing. So we know that these kinds of experiences also imprint on our brain, and often very, very long time. Now, coronavirus will be imprinted on our brain for a very, very long time period. So the point of really showing this is that early life experiences for individuals are absolutely unique. And those are also to be considered when you think about creating a super intelligent AI. Now, this experiment that was done in 1928 by John B. Watson, they will never allow these experiments now because of the ethics. They had a little Albert, and this Albert, little baby, was exposed to mouse or to a rabbit or a furry monkey or a dog or even a furry face. And then you see what happens to it. And when they allowed it to play, it was happily playing with this rat. But the next time, what Watson did was that as this rat approached the baby, he made a really loud noise. And this loud noise scared the poor baby. And now whenever it will come across this rat, it will exhibit that fear, which is now ingrained not only just to this rat, even if anything that is furry is presented to it, even Santa Claus or a clown, the baby will be afraid, or a dog which is furry, the baby will be afraid. So these kinds of things that leave constant impression also really shape our learning memory. Now here are two brains of a 3-year-old boy. One you picked up from a terrorist camp where this kid was beaten and it was not allowed to talk. He was chained and tortured and extremely neglected. You can see the difference in the brain size when a child is loved by his parents, how big this size brain is as compared to the one where the child is completely neglected. The most really heartbreaking thing is that you have such huge gaps, and major areas of the brain are empty, and the brain doesn't really connect from one side to another. The other important thing that you should know about human brain is that we have experiential blindness. So this is where I will really give you a test. So you have to really respond maybe on here, and the first 2 people to respond, there will be a special prize for you. So get ready and wake up. So in our brain, we actually have experiential blindness, which means that we are not born with built-in emotional circuits. Emotions are sort of a guesswork that is done by our brain. So our brain many times makes up things that may not be real, and it creates those hallucinations. And these hallucinations, oftentimes will show you things, a deja vu, and all other aspects that you cannot really, fully understand or comprehend. Look at this image. What comes to your mind? So, it's just something that you have to think up really hard. Your brain, because you have never seen this image before, your brain is now going all over the place, and it's starting to make guesswork. It's just guessing what it is. And here you may say, oh, this looks like maybe a camel. Oh, this maybe look like a fish. So your brain is constantly making these guesses, and well-educated guesses, but it has no clue what it actually is, and we call it experiential blindness. And a facial recognition program in artificial intelligence actually use these very encoded signals to be able to really guess whether the person who's looking at the cell phone is the real person or not. So have you looked at it? Can anyone make a guess? Let me show you what it actually is. This is actually a snake. And now you have seen that this is a snake. And you could relate it once your brain has seen this exposure very, very short time, very quickly. What happens is that if I show you again, you will have no problem actually seeing that snake. And similarly, here's another picture. Your brain is going all over the place trying to figure out what this could be, what we call experiential blindness. And I think this experiential blindness is something really, really important, because this is where major, breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and machine learning will come, whether the predictions could be made correctly. So if I show you the actual picture, this is what it is. Now that you have seen, if I go back, you actually can deduce, your brain remembers it, and it can recall that information as that yes lady, and she has got her horse. So, these are... The thing is that the conscious part of my brain, it scans only 42 frames per second, whereas the unconscious part of my brain does 1.2 million frames per second. So if I ask you, where is your foot? Up until now, you were not aware of your foot. And all of a sudden, when I mentioned to you, you started to wiggle. So the unconscious part of the brain actually does a lot of dirty work, which we are not even aware of, and we don't really know that part of the brain really well. So here is another very interesting experiment, that how you can actually fool your brain and how easily it can be fooled. Now this little student, he cannot see his left hand because of the cardboard. So what we do is we place a rubber hand in front of him, and at the same time when the rubber hand is stroked, the actual hand is stroked as well at the same finger. So if you do this, but he is asked to really pay attention to this rubber hand, which doesn't really belong to him. So what happens is that you can see, if I could play this. Some music can't play. No. I don't know why it's not playing. Okay, let me end the show. Okay, so what happens is the same time when we play this, what will happen is
practice. Here you can see the fake hand, focusing on it. There's the real hand not focusing on it, simultaneous stroking, and there are various ways you can test it.
So one more time, you can see that the rubber hand is focused on.
Practice. Here you can see the fake hand focusing on it. There's the real hand not focusing on it, simultaneous stroking, and there are various ways you can test it.
So his brain actually assumed that that particular hand belonged to it. And that is really the key for us to develop brain-machine interfacing, because we can now get the brain to think that an arm is part of its own body. And that's something that I will really like to talk next. So, we know that the brain is a mystery. How does brain functions? How to fix it when it goes haywire? Can biological intelligence, the different forms that I showed you, can it be simulated by a super intelligent AI? And what will happen to if we reach that point of singularity is something that I'd like to explore. Here's the brain once again. Is that if we can get all the information processing capabilities, its plasticity, its adaptability, its lifetime memory, its experiences, and we transfer it into a robot or a machine, can we actually make these machines human-like? So that's an interesting question. But the idea is really not new. Here is an old, really movie I could find where So I think, to be able to really do this, we first needed to, try to understand how brain functions. And that was really an important thing for us to do, because we needed to make sure that we tap into information processing capabilities of the brain by being able to record from large networks of brain cells. And that was really one of the major challenges in the field. So what we thought we could do is that perhaps we could design or develop a semiconductor chip that could be interfaced with brain cells. And this is how we can begin to understand how brain functions. And if something goes wrong with your brain, can we use these devices to be able to actually fix that problem? So that is something that we wanted to do. We created a semiconductor chip, which is actually the chip sits on the computer. It is connected to computer. We use chemical engineering and electrical engineering and to be able to design these semiconductors that have capacitors, so when we create a positive charge underneath the brain cells and stimulate brain cells as if another cell is talking to it. And if there are two brain cells that are connected, we can activate one. It releases this transmitter, the impulse travels, it actually tinkles the other one. When this cell is activated, we have a transistor that picks up a signal. So you complete a loop whereby an artificial device can talk to brain and brain can talk back to the artificial device. And that's really what we wanted to achieve. We wanted to do, we created these chips that were biologically compatible. Brain cells could actually grow on top of them. And then what we also did was that we were able to really grow these large networks of neurons. And when we could create an incubator system whereby we could keep these brain cells outside the brain alive, so we can provide oxygen, we could provide CO2, we could also provide these brain cells with all the nutrients that they needed to be able to grow. So what we could do is that for these brain cells, we allow them to grow on the chip, and we can actually monitor their activity. You can see that the growth actually starts, and these cells begin to connect with one another. And when they connect with one another, they begin to talk to each other. And what happens is the chip can now talk to them, and they can talk back to chip. That was really the key important experiment that nobody thought that we would be able to do it. So you know what we managed to do is to grow large networks of these neurons on these chips. We can record the activities of these hundreds and thousands of brain cells real time, and we can determine exactly which particular group of neurons are firing and how they're interconnected with each other. But again, the issue is that these are dissociated neurons, meaning that they are taken out of the brain and grown in culture, and they may not connect in culture the way they connect in the brain. So our next task was that can we take these intact brain slices and we interface with our chip, and can we record the activity of these brain cells using the semiconductor chip? And then, we could actually trigger and monitor at the level of single neurons, even the epileptic discharges in the brain. And I never really thought that I will live long enough to see this. Now, having gotten this opportunity, the question still that comes is that these brain cells are in contact with the electrodes and chip, but brain is three-dimensional. How do we monitor or record the activities of brain cells that are in different dimension? So for this, we developed another technique we call photoconductive stimulation. We grow these brain cells on semiconductor chip, and we label them with a specific dye. So when they discharge, when they fire, when they're activated, the cell actually lights up. So we fire laser through the microscope. Laser will change the properties of the wafer, and when that happens, the brain cells are activated with a single pulse of laser. And then this is where you could see that a single laser will trigger these neurons, and they fire large networks. And we can monitor the activity of large networks of these brain cells. Now, we have the ability to monitor the activity of large networks of neurons that are in contact with chip, and another network which is really up on top of those layers. You put it together, we can do is that this monkey has no arm. We plant the chip in the sensory motor cortex part of the brain. Monkey's eyes can pick up where the food palette is, and he can see it. And then what happens is that when its sensory motor cortex talks to its visual cortex talks to sensory motor cortex, this is where the chip could be. And then the chip picks up the activity, and because we designed the chip, we designed the artificial limb, we can connect them together just like a remote control its own arm. So people who lose their arms and legs in the future, I think there is a tremendous possibility that using these chips, one would be able to restore. And of course, these are really old, clunky devices. Now we use nanofibers, where the monkey can actually play at the speed of almost light. So we wanted to take it into humans, for seizure detection and wirelessly. The problem happens in seizures is that normally when somebody has seizures that they don't respond to drug, the surgeon decides to do surgery, but that surgery is actually a lot of guesswork. They will plant the electrodes on the scalp of these patients and these people, and then what happens is that these electrodes will pick up the activity, and there's a 30-foot cable. The child is attached to cable, and they have to stay in the hospital for 10 days, and then they pick up discharges and try to define where the seizures are coming from. It's a really not very reliable way. The children get stressed and staying in the hospital. So what we wanted to do was to take our chip first for clinical trials, where we wanted to design chip that will be completely wireless, and it's also, the electrodes are 300 times more sensitive than conventional electrodes. And then what we also wanted to do was to make it really MR compatible. So once we plant these chips inside the brain, we send the kid into a magnet, we take the magnet image, and then put the brain back again. The child can go home, and now whenever the child will seize, our electrodes will pick up the exact location where the seizures are coming, and it will generate a 3D image which will allow them to be able to actually pick up. So we put together a team of surgeons. We went in, plant the chip, open the brain, plant the chip inside the brain, and then we have a little dongle attached, which is wireless, and it can talk to your cell phone or a little backpack in your pocket. And we put the brain back up, and then whenever this child will seize, we can actually pick up seizures exquisitely. Then surgeon can go in and only take out the part where the actual seizures are coming from. So this is really a remarkable, first non-invasive approach to take the semiconductor chip or technology into the clinic. Now, we also know that the brain-machine interfacing that we do in our lab, when I think of really, when I reach out to grab this remote control, and if you are recording from my brain cells, the part of the cells that will fire, or part of my brain that will fire, will also be activated when I only imagine that I'm going to pick that remote control. So we can visualize, our actions, so the thoughts can be translated into machine, and they can tap into the motor program of an individual. An example will be, we have these robotic monkeys, and the students can actually have these electrodes around their scalp, and whatever the students will do, monkey will actually recapitulate it, and it will copy him with exquisite accuracy, blinking eyes, opening mouth, and then what we could do is we can also really turn the lights on or off in the lab by just thinking about it. And so we can bring in the young kids. They have never been trained, but they could do also control these robotic monkeys. But the idea really here is to teach and train them to control this cube in the open space where he can lift the cube up and down or push it down the tunnel. And the idea was that can we fly a drone by just thinking about it, by thinking the brain. So I'll show you some pretty cool things whereby some students, they don't even know where the car is. They're only imagining, and they can not only take the car from that and park it back where it is. And these are really young students who have never been trained before. And of course, they will crash as usual. But when you have, the trained graduate students, they can really drive this car with exquisite accuracy. So this really is a very good example of brain-controlled, devices that you are using both artificial intelligence and brain power to be able to control. We can also fly a drone, which is really brain-controlled. And we built on this little drone many small little sensors and cameras. And this camera provides feedback through the head here of the operator of this drone, who is only looking at it, only thinking about it, and controlling it through his own thought process. Turn left, turn right, go up, go down, and then really bring it down. And these sensors will constantly provide feedback, and with very tight space, you can actually land it very, very safely. So the idea here really is that, going back and forth between machines and human mind, would we be able to actually do things that have never been done? So in this particular case, we use really these augmented reality approaches, whereby we can send this student just about on any galaxy and planet, but even inside the human body, to be able to really perform surgeries, virtual surgeries. And this is really, once again, an integration of these approaches, and that what we could use. So the question that often comes is that, are we about to reach the point of singularity? Is this all science fiction, or is it really becoming a reality? Elon Musk said that, if we went into that direction, we will be calling Ham jo hai shaitan ko khula chhod denge, and we are about to really summon this devil. Now, would this be the last innovation that we will ever make? And would this be the last challenge that our humanity will face? And these are really very, very important and interesting questions that we ask ourselves all the time. This is your future doctor. This is what the doctor will really look like. And more of them are becoming realistic. And because what is actually happening now is that because of the coronavirus, we are going in that directions whereby even now our surgeons can perform surgery inside a magnet and while sitting in a very different room or even a different place. So let me show you a couple of videos and I will end it there. The important thing to remember here is that what the world is going to look like in next 30 years. So if you are searching for a career in the future, don't look for those careers now, but think as to what the world will really be like.
Only takes a moment for the unthinkable to become reality. In the near future, tragedy may come with new choices. Imagine you've been in a car crash that killed your daughter.
Is she okay? Is she okay?
Or has it?
Is she breathing? Hey. Is she okay?
Time of death, 9:17. Your daughter's brain was not impacted by the accident. If you wish to scan her brain for digitalization and upload, you have approximately 5 minutes.
Do it.
Now imagine the power you wield when you can order a digital copy of your daughter's brain. And do you know what comes next?
Hi, Dad.
One day delivered to your doorstep is an artificially intelligent android that will act, look, emote, just like your daughter. Every memory from birth on will remain intact, but she'll also be a walking computer with access to all the world. This is what your world will look like. This is the future of artificial intelligence. It's the deep future. Your body, gone. You're all computing, all the time.
Let me also introduce you to Erica.
Hello there. May I ask your name?
Hi there, my name is Ignacio.
It's nice to meet you, Ignacio. So, what country are you from?
I'm from Canada.
It's pretty cold there, eh?
Meet Erica, the android. She or it, depending on who you ask, is one of the most sophisticated humanoids ever designed. And she's giving us a glimpse of what a year-million AI might look like.
Modern computers are adding machine. They add very fast, giving the illusion that they're thinking.
So that's really an important question to think about. Like when we reach the point of singularity, where we have super intelligent devices, can we coexist? Can you actually find love? Actually, for some things you have to go to rishta.com. You can't find probably love, but can you actually, are we summoning these devils? That we developed and is subsequently evolved, or would it be able to also interact with us in a real sense? And what would the actually world look like in years to come? That's an important question. The one thing is important is that if we continue to give up our own biological intelligence to these devices, one day we will be at the receiving end of charity. So let me actually introduce you to our students in the lab who are doing all the work. Brilliant PhD students here. They have all graduated, some postdocs, and boys are always boys and everywhere. This is one of the Halloween party, and they kind of dress up as way. We had a really brilliant student at the age of 18. He learned how to fly planes. He was behind really designing all of this. Now we could use rat brain cells and we simulate them. And these rat brain cells can really fly an aircraft without a pilot, because we can input flight simulation program that write and actually develop. And he won the Governor General's highest medal for that research. Pierre, and he has also now started his own company. He was a PhD student and now postdoc in my lab. And these are the people who actually do most of the work, and they're really very, very brilliant. Colin Luke was also my PhD student, who also did MD at the same time. he's doing now his residency in neurology. And so I'm really indebted to all of them, and I thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to really take questions and that you may have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naweed, for such an insightful talk. Now, at the end, obviously the house is open for the questions. So I would like to request all of the audience. So we have many faculty members from different departments and students. So please raise your hands first and then ask the question. So house is open for the questions.
They're all gone to sleep, I think.
We have no question, I think.
Don't be shy.
Yes. Yes. Yes, Sabat. Please ask.
Sir, I wanted to ask about the fine-tuned proteins. Like we can predict different kind of stuff using artificial intelligence on the basis of the already the data we have. So, how we can predict that what kind of protein that we can make from functions of that protein by using artificial intelligence. As we have the amino acid sequence, we can change them anytime. So, if we change them and get us a model or an algorithm that can tell us what this protein is gonna do. So, if we can design certain peptides, those can add the drug for certain diseases. So how far are we from something like that?
That's a really great question. And if we had more time, unfortunately, time goes really fast. I would have really shown you, many predictive algorithms through machine learning, whereby not only that we can predict a particular protein, they did the mRNA sequences and now the mutation that is happening to, COVID-19 virus, they could actually predict as to where it most likely will mutate. And these recent mutations could also be predicted. So I think once you even know the sequence, or even the genome, you could predict certain things using on the basis of machine learning and also on the basis of algorithms. Many a times now, that's what I said, that those days are gone when the doctors will be actually physicians. They will be Google will be IBM, will be the future doctors of the world, because they have all the information. Now you think about radiology, MRIs, CT scans, cardiograms. We need to pay huge tons of money to radiologists to be able to read those, most of the recorded, either the MRIs or their cardio echograms. Now the machine can do this much better and more accuracy than a doctor would do, and it does it really, really fast. So I think those are the positive aspects whereby we could use these machine learning or algorithm or the predictive model to be able to predict as to where potential, protein sequences will be. But you also at the same time, what really amazes us is that I share 98% of brain, genome with a monkey, and I have only twice the number of genes than a fruit fly, than a worm or a bee. And yet, I am capable of actually doing many different things. So we know that it's the genes per se are not really the core determinants. It's what tags them, what adds on to, and what are the circumstances under which these genes and these proteins actually function. So for example, the spike proteins in bat, they have no effect for the poor bat. But as soon as they enter a human, they're absolutely devastating. And it's the same protein. So the question really is that how we go about understanding that how quickly a protein sequence what we can generate and what would it really mean. So the point is that you are making is very valid, that we could predict, but we can never ever be sure whether this particular protein in a particular cell in combination with the other protein synthetic machinery will function the way it will function in one organism or under one experimental condition versus the other.
Yes, sir. Sir, can I go with a few more?
Well, if there are no other questions, sure.
Okay, if anyone else gonna ask.
If
Go ahead.
anyone,
I'm gonna go.
They may be still thinking. Go ahead.
Okay, sir. Just recently, I was reading an article about squid changing its genome through its neurons. So, like how I couldn't get think that literally they are trying to change their own genome with their own neurons at an individual level. So, like, what kind of thing that this could be like changing their genomes at with their own neurons? So, if that's possible for all other organisms, or maybe it's just for the squid. There was a gene, it was called ADAR2, that was found in squid as well as in jellyfish, that was used to change its own genome at very fine-tuned portions of its genome. So, like, my question is pretty messed up, but I want to ask about that. How are they thinking, how their brain is working, that they kind of wanted to change this specific sequence? So, do you know about that, sir?
So, many of these proteins and these signaling molecules, they are very adaptive. They have adaptive abilities. When you say that the circuit in the brain cells can change the genome, it's actually not what can change the genome. Even the bacteria in your gut, which is the gut microbiome, these bacteria in your gut, they are capable of changing your personality traits. But those are only really, the changes do not occur at the genome level, but they are epigenome, and they are epigenetic changes that are really downstream from the actual genome itself. So these changes, I'll give you an example, that, this bat has an incredible immune system. And so when these viruses, coronaviruses or COVID, lives in that will constantly up the ante, make it difficult for this virus to survive. But the virus continuously alters its protein synthetic machinery to be able to adapt to whatever this bat throws at it. So when bat takes flight, during flight, its body temperature goes up to 40 to 41 degrees. And when it goes to 41 degrees, nothing can actually survive, because this is what our body does, is that it raises the temperature. So these intruders like bacteria and viruses that thrive on 37-degree body temperature, our body increases the temperature to make it inhospitable or unfriendly environment for them. So as a result, their growth is suppressed. So when the virus sees this, virus will bring about another change in its own, in this protein structure, and it is very happy. So this is one of the reasons when we've been infected with coronavirus, and it is happy at 40 degrees, and body temperature, fever goes up, the virus is loving it. And those specific changes can actually occur at the protein level. And you see that the example of that will be the coronavirus itself. It has no DNA. It is an RNA-based, virus. And you can see 12 to 17 mutations in England have occurred in very, very short time period. And that is really causing the major devastation. England is going to get shut down. They already got shut down. And so this has never really happened. And you could see that there are, some of these changes are in the spike protein that binds to the ACE receptor. The two amino acid changes that are really critical is that evades and it really fools your immune system in your body, and they just go below the radar. So you could see that these changes do not require neurons or the genome or the genetic makeup. They can actually occur as per at the messenger RNA or at the protein level. So, anyone who says that the brain actually can change the genetic makeup, it's really not true. Those will be the epigenetic changes, and they're often transit, and they can revert back.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I want to ask another thing. Sure, sir.
I think Sabad, anyone else ask a question? Ask some question? Rizwan, Sabad, please.
Assalamualaikum, sir. Mohammed Rizwan is here. Sir, I am asking that
can we control our internal body processes by using these chips which we have made? For example,
really good questions. Can we control our body parts? If I give you an example, we had a young lady who had severe ataxia. She could not sit or stand or walk. She just falls off. And her life was really devastated. We put 70 electrodes around her tongue, and we put a helmet. So every time the helmet will tilt, it will shock her tongue gently. And so within actually, 20 minutes, her tongue switched over. And within 2 months of really training, her tongue became her sensory motor cortex. And then she could ride a bike, she could dance, she could do just about everything else. So your brain is extremely, plastic, as I showed you. Even it can own a rubber hand, which doesn't belong to it by just thinking about it or by imagining about it. So we should be able to control certain parts by not just using really a chip, which we could do it anyways. Now, we had a young girl who had an anti-peristaltic movement. Every time she would eat, she would throw up, because instead of peristaltic movements going downwards, taking the food into her GI tract, they will be going the opposite direction, so the food will get thrown back. We just put a small little chip, and as she starts to eat around her vagus nerve, the compression of the stomach will activate, and it shuts down her vagus nerve, and she could eat, and she was really fine. So you can control, her stomach by planting a chip inside her body. Similarly, we have now a chip that we're working on that really is connected to your sciatic nerve, and when they carry pain in these people who really have bad pain, and when it carries the pain, the chip locks onto those C fibers, and it shuts them down. It really, as soon as they discharge. It's just like your cell phone is sitting, it's quiet, but somebody calls you, it dials up, it rings up. And then you connect with that individual, even though many millions of people will be online. So same way we designed the chip, and it's connected to the sciatic nerve. And what happens is that when the impulse comes in, it will block that impulse, and if the pain impulse never gets to spinal cord or to your brain. So, similarly, I think the idea is that these chips and these devices can be used to control different organs. At the same time, what we could also do is to use your own brain and train your own brain to be able to really control internal organs. And I think this is we doing it, for example, with transcranial magnetic stimulations for children who are obsessive compulsive, children who have ADHD, to be able to actually control that part of the brain and turn it off.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rizwan Saab. Thank you, everyone. I think there is no other question, and I think we can talk on this topic hours and when we have a speaker like Dr. Naweed. So,
absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajid Saab. And with this, we will end this session. And for the participants, in next series, in next session of this series, we will have a friend of Dr. Naweed. We will have Dr. Syed very good speaker as well and very good scientist. So hope you will enjoy, and you have enjoyed today's lecture. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Naweed and everyone. So thank you and Allah Hafiz. So we will end this session now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Imran. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.